Welcome to the Royal Roads MBA Strategy online course, Unit 1, Session 1. In this session, Part A, we will examine the importance for you to adopt a strategist perspective, as well as undertake a quick review how to undertake a case study analysis. In Part B, immediately following, you'll each receive your little red toolbox. On the menu today, first, I will briefly review some course administrative issues. I'll provide some reflective thoughts as to what is in the news and how that news is likely to impact Canada and Canadian business. We will also examine the importance to you as strategists to adopt a strategist perspective. We will review a case study analysis and finally provide a few moments for reflective thought and entries into your journal. What follows are a number of unrelated administrative points I would like to bring to your attention. Your strategic management text is, in my opinion, a keeper. It is a wonderful book that contains numerous aide-de-memoirs and checklists. I know you'll find it handy when you return to your workplace, as well as undertaking your major research project. I suggest early on that you print out a hard copy of the complete course in order to understand how it all fits together. I have divided the 8-week course into 4 units, each unit containing 2 sessions. To assist you in your studies, I have prepared for each session an online presentation that includes videos, PowerPoints, URL links, and interviews. I hope you'll find them beneficial. I want to underscore at the outset that you are not expected to memorize the materials of the text, but rather scan the materials, and you will find that over time they'll become more familiar to you. Your head is as good as mine. Accordingly, it is not my intention in these sessions to review the entire content of each chapter, but rather to highlight briefly what I consider to be the must-knows. The should and could-knows I will leave for you in the fullness of time to review. The specifics on how you'll be evaluated are set out in some detail on the course website. You will be evaluated by undertaking 2 short team concept applications, each with a value of 15 marks. You will also undertake a strategic assignment with a value of 20% of your final grade. Your business professionalism, which is something more than simply participation, is worth 20%. You'll find details set out on the course outline as to what I mean by professionalism. And finally, we will have a 3-hour exam with a value of 30%. You will be allowed to bring into the exam the Power Handbook. I will have more to say about the final exam in subsequent sessions. With MP3 players, I have also provided a number of podcasts that enrich some of the sessions that you may wish to listen to. I'm available to you at any time, to include weekends, at 250-472-3836. My office is in the Grant Building, room 242. I review my emails daily. During the course, you'll most likely find me at the 472 number. I want you to succeed, and I am here as you need me. What's in the news? It is important to us as strategists we constantly scan our ecosystem in order to identify transformational shifts that are likely to impact our business. This is not simply about reading what's on the front page, but it is about reflective thought and arriving at conclusions as to how you might best exploit the opportunities or mitigate the damage these shifts present. I will be discussing the importance of a strategist scanning the ecosystem later in the session. I would also invite each of you to provide your thoughts on today's news and to participate as you're able. There's more guidance on your participation in the discussion sites in the course outline. So let's get underway. Click on the link provided. This strategy course is intended to be a challenging, introductory, formative course in the Masters of Business Administration program. The content covered and the knowledge gained in this course will inform you of the strategic and leadership mental models for all of the program disciplines. Strategic management is not a box of tricks or a bundle of techniques. It is analytical thinking and commitment of the resources to action. However, it is first and foremost a course about strategy and managing for success. The course centers on the theme that an organization achieves sustained success if, and only if, there is an astute and timely strategic game plan for running the organization, and the plan is implemented and executed with proficiency. Using new mental models, you will examine the crafting and execution of strategy in the quest for competitive advantage. By adopting these mental models and by viewing through the lenses of leadership and management, you will develop an understanding of the principles, concepts, and primary analytical strategic methodologies in current use today by today's strategists. You will learn how to probe, question, and evaluate all aspects of a company's industry and competitive environment, as well as its resources and sustainable competitive capabilities. I want you to draw on your own experience and previously acquired business knowledge and combine these with the concepts and tools presented in this course to develop leadership and management skills required to craft and execute strategy. While the term strategy has been used in large part by the military for millenniums, in the business context, it only came part of the lexicon in the early 60s when John F. Kennedy became President of the United States. Over the past number of decades, the discipline of strategic management has grown exponentially. I offer this caveat. Because it is a relatively new discipline, there is not yet full agreement on a number of the terms and models. You may find strategists use the term vision and mission, goals and objectives, and other descriptors interchangeably. In this course, I will provide specific definitions. However, do not be surprised when you return to your workplace and discover different interpretations. And that is not a problem, as long as the folks working together understand the intent. This course is about advancing the practice of management. I often quote in this class the thoughts of Sun Tzu. Indeed, I commend to you the book Sun Tzu and the Art of Business by Mark McNeely. The book references are included on the course site. There are a number of military strategists that you could do well to reflect upon. Another you might consider is Clausewitz. His strategy is generally to go straight up the center and run right over the enemy. Sun Tzu, on the other hand, plays with our minds. He tries to win all without fighting. You will also find a great link to a Sun Tzu site I quite enjoy. I have arranged for Sun Tzu to visit our sessions from time to time and offer us some thoughts to reflect upon. Sun Tzu, what guidance do you have for us today about the importance for these learners to adopt a strategist perspective?
It is too late to cover your ears after you hear the thunderclap.
Over the years, much has been written about the initial military campaigns conducted by the German military during the opening years of World War II. The Germans referred to their new form of warfare as Blitzkrieg, lightning war. It was the application of new technology, specifically tanks and aircraft, supported by mobile infantry in a highly mobile encirclement battle. The success of the new strategic mental model for the conduct in war, enabled by technology and fresh innovative thinking, was very much in evidence during the invasion of Poland and the penetration of the Ardennes. First, a few opening thoughts. It is important as strategists we do not wait to hear the thunderclap, but rather that we are actively scanning our ecosystem for the earliest indication of the bolt of lightning that precedes the thunderclap. The challenges faced by management today have never been greater as a result of our turbulent ecosystem. All of the political, economic, societal, technical, and other factors are shifting exponentially in a period I refer to as the quickening in one of my earlier publications. The economic global playing field is being leveled, and like the Allies in the opening days of World War II, faced with a new fast-moving military strategy made possible by new military technology, we too find ourselves not ready. As a manager, you will need to shed your old mental models. You will need to adopt fresh, new, innovative thinking in order to anticipate and lead change within your industry. Public, private, and not-for-profit sectors are all subject to these seismic shifts. The first session of the course will offer you guidance on how to reset your thinking and assist you in adopting a new strategist perspective, a perspective that will be at the core of your strategic planning. First, let me poke the bear, as I'm prone to do. MBA degrees are commodities. Yes, I said commodities. So the question becomes, how can you differentiate your degree from similar degrees awarded to others globally? How will you obtain a sustainable competitive advantage over others armed with the same qualifications competing in the global workplace? The answer can be found in part from the words of a former provincial cabinet minister, Gary Dunford, a member of Ralph Klein's government in Alberta at the time the NDP governed British Columbia. I was chairing a conference when Minister Dunford made the comment, Alberta intends to put up at its border between Alberta and BC in big bold Gothic print a sign, "You are now entering Alberta, be prepared to think differently." So the answer, you need to think differently. You need to differentiate yourself by adopting new mental models and demonstrating critical thinking about your ecosystem. You must, among other things, be able to transform from a manager to a leader and back as the situation dictates. This chapter will provide you some guidance on how to achieve this personal stretch objective. It is critical that you develop the appropriate mindset. Neuroscience informs us that when we are faced with making decisions in the workplace, over 80% of the time, we will make the same decision we made on earlier occasions when faced with similar facts. We readily cling without much thought to our old mental models and decision processes. This is not to say these decisions were incorrect, but rather to simply underscore the importance that all decisions require our biases to be removed and that all facts be considered before rendering a decision. A strategic mindset is at the core of being an entrepreneur. Businesses that are strategically focused and willingly embrace new mental models and are innovative are the businesses that will prosper. This is the mindset that will be critical to you as a strategist. This is the mindset that will differentiate you while others remain a commodity. So then, what is a strategist perspective? Here's an interesting discussion about the concept of mental models. Strategists will be early adapters of new mental models. Crafting strategies in turbulent times requires strategists to fully reflect on the convergence of the front page and the business section of the daily media. These stories cannot be read any longer in isolation. The political, economic, societal, technical, and indeed cultural shifts reported on the front page must undergo critical reflection as we review the business section. We need to identify the impact of these transformational forces on our business at the earliest opportunity. To lead today, you must lean into the wind. You must challenge all. You must constantly test your and others' hypotheses.
The great thing about cognition is that it gives you access to a lattice work of mental models, which is a phrase from Charlie Munger, Warren Buffett's partner at Berkshire Hathaway. A lattice work of mental models, what the hell does that mean? It means that you can approach whatever you're dealing with, whether it be investing, in the case of Charlie Munger, or chemistry, or physics, or mathematics, or photography, or organizing a children's party, with lots of different models, mental models that you can bring to bear on that particular challenge. And being able to switch from one model to another model is something that all great thinkers are able to do. It's almost definitive of a great thinker. Geniuses, inventors, and so on. Being able to switch from, in one moment, thinking architecturally, in the next moment, thinking in terms of concepts from chemistry, or from physics, or from whatever it might be. And for most people, that's a really challenging thing. And yet it's actually not something that's beyond everyone. It's something that you can actually learn, but it takes a long time. The wonderful thing about cognition is that it now takes next to no time at all to switch between one mental model and another. It's just a click of the mouse, that's all. And you can suddenly have access to concepts from architecture, and then concepts from marketing, and then concepts from information technology, and then concepts from leadership, from you name it. All of these concepts being able to be applied directly to the thing that you want to think about. Isn't that great?
Today, all about us Our turbulent ecosystem is vibrating. Chances are, for most of you, that your children will never know what a video rental store is, nor will they have to experience the idea of a movie title being out of stock. Today, almost every industry is being disrupted. Today, the print media is contracting because of the shift to electronic publishing made possible by technology that better aligns with the value propositions demanded by the consumer. Indeed, not far behind is the traditional radio business model, broadcasting from a station with a tower and constrained by conditions of government licensing authorities, are now commencing to see their industry fragment as aggressive competitors emerge with timely online publications and niche music stations. These new media folks, of course, have no regulatory bodies to constrain their endeavors and few barriers to entry. How long will Cirrus Radio survive? The question for the strategist is, how do you bring some stability to your firm's world? We are at a strategic inflection point, a node, where power and strategic advantage are joined at this particular point in time. I had the opportunity recently to go to Blenheim Castle and also to visit Winston Churchill's grave. Recall Churchill's observation prior to World War II. The era of procrastination, of half measures, of soothing and baffling expedients, of delays is coming to a close. In its place, we are entering a period of consequences. Are you ready? Globalization was touted as the vehicle to stimulate economic development and address political and social problems. In many ways, it has. Clearly, Canada is better off economically because of globalization. Unfortunately, it seems for too many others, the promise has fallen short. In many countries, the clash of civilizations and pragmatic economics has presented greater threats to social and political stability. Well, welcome. I'm glad you've joined us. We have today Ken Stratford. Ken, I'm going to read his bio off here to you quickly, is President and Chief Business Coach. He's had 16 years as a Vice President in a very senior management position. He's been involved with $2 billion organizations. He's Chair of the Railroads University's Business Advisory Board, Director of Small Business BC, CEO of Business Victoria, and interesting there, he was telling me on the way down that they have established well over 20 new businesses a year, new entrepreneurial startups.
Make that 200.
200. Right, month, thank you. He's former chair of Workforce 21. I worked with Ken at the Western Canadian Partnership for Advanced Skills. He was chairman of that. He's a much sought after speaker, does 30 to 40 public speaking engagements throughout the year, and is deemed by most of us as someone who's a futurist. And so it's in that capacity today that we're delighted to have Ken with us to talk to us about the importance of being a futurist. Ken, welcome.
Great to be here. I've been looking forward to it.
Good, Ken. Ken and I have worked together for a while. Ken, this class is about the importance of strategy folks having a strategic mindset. Do you agree with that?
I can't think of a time in history when it's been more necessary. One of the things is that, there's a statement, I think it's Jastrow, I'm not sure, he said, change is coming at us at an incredible pace and blind men everywhere are trying to stop it.
Yeah.
I don't know about trying to stop it, but the pace of change is such that any of our learners today have to be prepared to take Gretzky's cliched advice and skate to where the puck is going to be rather than where it is. Because where it is today is going to be a very different scenario to where it is tomorrow.
Interesting. How do we do that? How do we know where the puck is going to go? How do we stay informed?
I think the first thing that a futurist needs to be is an historian. There are definite trends and patterns to human behavior. And the more we can understand about how we have reached the point we're at now, the better we're positioned to forecast where it may go. And I stress the may go because there is no absolute certainty. And within that, as futurists, we talk about wild cards. 9/11 was a wild card. There was no way to predict that. Yeah. It happened and it turned the world, at least in terms of North America and Europe, on its ear. But even those can be made allowances for. So without the wild cards, we can project, by looking back of how we got here, we can look at where we're going and then start to plan some approaches to that. I think the best people that I know of doing it, ironically, is the military.
Mm-hmm.
And we make jokes about military intelligence as
Oxymoron?
as an oxymoron. But in the military, and you have a background in the military, you well know, the thing is the plan. And the old line about the plan will never survive contact with the enemy. So you have set objectives rather than strict planning. And I think that if you set objectives and then you lay on it where the future may take us, then I think that the people who can do that are going to be far more successful.
Certainly scenario planning is one thing we'll talk about in this course, and I think Shell does this extremely well. They take all the what-if possibilities and craft plans and stick them on the shelf for that eventuality, and on many occasions they tend to be first off the mark among oil companies because they've done the scenario planning.
And BP wasn't.
That's right.
I mean,
they weren't ready for it. Good
they just
example,
weren't
yeah.
ready for it.
Yeah.
And I think that often in the corporate world, there's a tendency to look at some scenario planning, which comes up from their internal think tanks, and then say, you know what, that potential for that wild card is so unthinkable, we literally won't think about it.
Yeah.
And yet, by not doing so, we see the price of that, and we see the ramifications throughout every element of society in that. Societal, environmental, economic, these are ripples in the stream. And I think that we have to position ourselves to know what the implications are and possible outcomes of bad decisions.
Mm-hmm. Ken, what advice, or before we get to the advice, can we talk for a few minutes using your lenses as a futurist, looking out in front? Have you any thoughts of what we might be looking for? Are there any things emerging through the fog that strategists have to be monitoring for? In fact, we say in this class the importance of strategic thinking, of a strategist perspective, is taking what's on the front page and what's on the business section, and not just reading it and saying I've read it, and not just reading it and saying I've read it, but actually putting the two together, merging them, and stepping back and asking, so what? And indeed, the hard thing, I think, for people like yourself in very senior management roles is finding that time during the day to close the door and do that hard reflective thought is what the 2 pages mean. Would you agree?
You know, Michael Gerber talks about the importance of managing on the business rather than in the business. And I think that is critical. You had asked me earlier about, or I made the statement that you first have to be an historian. An historian will allow you to track trends. And also what's coming down the pipe in terms of specific issues. The number one issue for us in Canada particularly, and to a large extent most of the OECD countries, is that of a declining workforce. Mm-hmm. We do have some changes underway at the moment where some, in the short term, there's some high unemployment. Not so in Canada, but certainly in other countries. And yet, if we look back over the last 20 years at the steady decline in the fertility rate, it's not hard to project that forward and say, where are we going to find the workers of the future? You know, I'm very proud of the fact that in this country, we have among the highest educated women in the world. And women are getting degrees and post-secondary qualifications in a whole variety of fields. I think that's absolutely wonderful. But women make the choice, the more education they have, to have fewer children.
Yeah.
As a man, I'm smart enough to not make judgments on that. That's their business. Yeah. It's none of our business. Yeah. But the reality from a demographer's point of view is that we will simply not have the labor resources in the future. And we are seeing in the West, for example, where up to 2035, we're forecasting a shortfall of about 500,000 jobs that we won't have people to fill. So there's a classic illustration. And I would say our learners, as managers, have to now be planning how do we deal with that in the future, which is working smarter.
Yeah. It's interesting. I mean, I did a little read on some of that materials, and currently we bring in about 250,000 folks as immigrants a year, and even at that, it's going to be insufficient to maintain our social safety nets, as the year you point out, 20, 30, 40 years out in front of us. But it's also a national security issue, it seems to me,
Yeah.
that here we sit on the second largest landmass in the world, filled with all the natural resources, what Michael Porter refers to as the basic factor endowments. We have 25% of the world's fresh water. And how are 30, 35 million people today, 5, 10 years out, going to expect to hold on to the second largest landmass in the world?
Well, you make a very good point about the immigration. Currently, our immigration in this country is around 250,000 a year. And C.D. Howe Institute in Toronto did a study 3 years ago, and they said in order to meet our most basic needs for labor, we would have to increase that tenfold to 2.5 million a year. Now, that's about an 8% on our base population rate. No country could absorb that. The cost of social integration, education, cultural integration, we just couldn't do it. So we know that that's not the answer. And most futurists are optimists. I'm very much an optimist in all my public speaking. This area, the one about the shrinking workforce, is the one where I'm not optimistic unless we rise up to meet the challenge. And I believe that while climate change is the number one issue we face in the world today on a variety of fronts, the issue that we face in a shrinking workforce can have as greater impact, albeit that it concentrates primarily on the economic.
Is there a double-edged sword to that? I think of the Americans right now with 20 million folks coming in from Mexico, the Spanish element down there, and they can't absorb the lifeboat. They just can't take any more people. There's not the infrastructure in place. There's insufficient water in California. California, as you know, is a basket case, as is New Jersey and other states down there. Immigration, from their perspective, is something maybe they can't do.
Yeah, I think that the U.S. is facing special challenges, and it in turn, as we look to all of the interrelationships, it in turn has kept their fertility rate high, around 2.1, which is replacement rate. And
So you're saying high unemployment leads to more children, is that it?
Exactly. Well, certainly with the Latino population
Yeah.
coming in, they tend culturally to move toward larger families. And again, that's not something that anyone should make a judgment upon because it is a cultural issue that's important to them. But it does give them a replacement rate. And so they won't be in as difficult a situation. Europe is in a fairly good situation short term because as the EU has been expanded, there's been a very large source of labor coming from countries that only 20 years ago we were referring to as developing nations at the time the wall came down. So Poland, Turkey would be two classic illustrations.
Yeah.
But that's, again, relatively short term.
Yeah. What other trends do you see out there for strategists in the Canadian business perspective? Anything coming down they should be looking at? Technology possibly?
I think that the important, you used the term earlier, the what if, and I think that the what if scenario is what every industry should be chasing. I spoke to a group of realtors the other day about issues around Competition Bureau, issues around new models of independent pricing on the part of their vendors. They have to realize that that's going to happen. We saw situations where sectors did not play what if. Doctors didn't say, what if there were street corner clinics and you didn't have to make an appointment to come and see me in 10 days' time. And the doctors that didn't make the change saw their incomes decline dramatically. Dentists didn't say 40 years ago, what if nobody has cavities anymore? And how will I still run my business model? The bad guys were the guys who did it well, what we think of as the bad guys, and it's the tobacco industry. And the tobacco industry did some very careful scenario planning and said, what if smoking became socially and from a health perspective unacceptable among the leading nations? We now have to switch our concentration upon developing nations, sadly, and we have seen massive increases in smoking in the countries that can least afford it, by the people who can least afford it, and can least afford the health attendant costs. But they did it from a point of view of scenario planning.
It's interesting. You're raising, I guess, corporate governance, the sustainability, those other considerations other than the bottom line, and that aren't you in here? How much of that will be an issue as we move forward for Canadian business?
Well, I think that, the biggest thing that we've seen on the horizon has, of course, been the rise of the information age and digital environment. And I don't think we have seen 10% of its impact yet. I think that what we will see is a much greater preponderance of distance learning. And we as educators think of distance learning in the classic sense, that we're educating a population which isn't resident on campus. But distance learning among corporations who are going to have to invest heavily in education is going to be on the rise. And I think we may even see, where we think of corporations historically as putting incentives in, you're a rising young man there, Terry, so...
At 70.
And you're a 30-year-old junior manager, and we've offered incentives to send you away to university or whatever. I think that's going to switch to where it becomes almost punitive. If you don't do this, if you don't stay up to date with the educational resources that we offer, you're going nowhere.
Yeah, interesting.
And I think that we will see corporations forced into doing that, because without that, they simply won't have the well-trained and well-educated resources that they're going to need to compete.
Now, you're involved in a large an international company that is in education. You're putting modules like that together. You mentioned earlier for African entrepreneurs, small mom and pop shops. And maybe that's the new trend you're talking about, that they don't have to attend a formal class like we're having here today, but rather they can zoom in and out and take a 10-minute snippet here and a 15-minute module there and download that little piece of information they need for the day's question.
Well, the model is there from industry, and that is the rise in the post-Japan manufacturing model of just-in-time. And when we look at just-in-time on the supply chain, and we look at just-in-time on the educational supply chain, that's what the markets, I believe, will come to demand. Give me a basic grounding in an understanding of whatever the issue might be, but then give me just-in-time modules so that I can deliver that in a hurry. If I am an employer and I have 30 employees, and I've taken some basic training in HR principles, but I'm ramping up a new project, got to hire 5 more people, and now I need the just-in-time services at the university level, the college level, that will help me to do things right and not make some expensive mistakes. So I think the just-in-time training is going to be the answer to that. And the kind of work that we do at Royal Roads supplies a lot of that need, in my opinion.
Well, Ken, it's fascinating. I wish we could have more time, but I know our students, I don't know what our length of this particular module is, but it must be an hour and a half anyway, so I'm sure they want to move on to the things. But this has been fascinating. I thank you. We have indeed fortunate today to have Ken Stratford, entrepreneur, educator, businessman, strategist, and a futurist, join us for a few minutes and share some of his thoughts. Thank you for watching.